Defining your role. Site owners can do a lot of tasks for themselves: create libraries and lists, customize pages, create project sites, add members, and control access. If departments administer their own sites, the support role for the SharePoint administrator often involves more teaching than doing. If only IT administers sites, then SharePoint administrators can become quite busy with routine tasks. It's important to define the support role for the SharePoint admin within your organization. You need to identify the scope of the job and establish user expectations. Here are some suggested tasks. Train users to perform site list and library creation tasks. The whole idea with SharePoint is to empower the users. And a key part of that is educating them on which templates to use and which ones are going to meet their specific needs. Administer server-side settings through central administration. And of course, always monitor server health and resolve any issues that arise. Perform scheduled backups and restores as necessary. Create templates and content types to streamline administration on the user side. Deploy add-on solutions, which would include web parts, features, to meet identified needs of the business. If departments administer their own sites, SharePoint admins mainly deal with the global issues that affect the entire site collection, web application, or server farm. You need to restrict access to global SharePoint settings to control change. In particular, you should limit access to the following resources: administrative accounts in SharePoint and in SQL. Central administration site. This should be limited to only the farm administrators. Service applications. These should be limited to the farm administrators and to anybody with the role of managing that particular service application. Site administration pages for top-level sites on each site collection. Only SharePoint administrators or other IT personnel should have access to these resources, with one exception. The department site owner can access top-level sites if he or she also has the role of site collection administrator. Another aspect of support is the change process. Changes to global SharePoint settings have broad effects. They can change how existing features work or stop them from working at all. To avoid problems, you should create a change process to control change. Most organizations have a change process in place for major changes or anything that's done on the production farm. And they will also have associated change windows for that, but you may want to create a site to track the changes that have been performed on the farm. The process should identify why the change is needed, who approved the change, what changes affect. Is it at the web application level? Is it at the site collection level? Is it at the web application level? When the change will occur. And if it's in a production environment, that is going to be during the approved change window. And any prerequisites before making the change. Also keep in mind to coordinate with any other teams that are going to be part of the process. Many companies use a parallel staging server to evaluate changes before they make the changes on the production server. Same as in SharePoint. You should never make a change in your production farm without thoroughly testing it in another environment prior. It's a good idea before installing add-ons and service packs, anything along those lines, but can be very burdensome for minor changes. So it needs to be determined what changes will be required to take place during the change window. Let's begin by creating a task list to track the changes that have been performed on our SharePoint farm. Click Site Actions, More Options. We're going to create a task list. And here you can see all the different options that we have available to you. Click on Tasks under the Tracking category. And here we're going to give it a name of Change Log. And the description is Tracks Global Changes made to SharePoint. Do we want to display this on the quick launch? Yes, because this is going to be an active task list and it'll be utilized quite a bit. Send an email when ownership is assigned. We're going to choose No and click Create. And now we have our first task, list. And you can see the columns that are associated with this task list. We have type, title, assigned to, status, priority, due date, percent complete, and predecessors. For our purpose, we need to modify this and add some additional columns. So if we click on List Settings, that's on the ribbon on the far right under the List tab, it's going to take us to the settings for this item or for this task list. If you scroll down, you're going to see content types that are already enabled. Because it was a task list, these are the ones that are set by default, and these can be changed. Columns, these are the columns that are associated with this list. We want to click Create Column. Actually, let's go back, and we're going to change an existing column. So let's scroll down and click on the Title column. And we're going to call it Change. Might as well utilize what we already have there instead of recreating it. Tell it OK. Now if we scroll down, if you look at the list, you're going to see Change. It's going to tell you a single line of text, Task Summary. And these are the content types that are associated with it. Now let's go ahead and add some additional columns. We need to know who requested the change. So this time we are going to click Create Column, create it from scratch, and this one's going to be called Requested By. And this isn't going to be a single line of text. This is going to be a person or group. Require that this column contain information. Yes, if there's a change that's going to be made, we need to know who's requiring that. Allow multiple selections. Usually it's one person that's making the request, so we're just going to leave it at no. Allow selection of people only or groups. Groups most likely are not going to be making the request. Again, we'll leave that at the default, people only. Choose from all users. Absolutely. There's no one particular group that may be making the request. Field name with presence, and then OK. Let's add another column. This one's for Approved By. And again, this is going to be a person or a group. Require that this contain information? No. Allow multiple selections? No. Allow selection of people only? Correct, because it'll be one individual making the approval or approving the request. And click OK. Go with the defaults. The next column we're going to add is going to be Effects. What level of SharePoint is going to be affected by this change? And the type of information this column is going to contain is going to be choice. The description, what is the scope of this change? Require that this contain information? Yes. Enforce unique values? Yes, you don't want someone spelling farm 3 different ways with 3 different spellings. And now we have to enter our choices, and this is going to be a drop down. So from here it's going to be farm, global, web application, service application, site collection, and site. This will be a drop-down. Allow fill-in choices? No. You want users to be able to select these specific items. A default value? We want to take this out. We're going to leave it as choice, but we don't really want it to have a default. It'll have to be entered. and click OK. If we're going to enforce unique values, it's going to require that the column be indexed, and that'll also help when it comes to searching. Click OK. And then we're going to add the column prerequisites. It's going to be a choice column. What must be done before the change? Require that this column contain information? No. And what are the drop-down options going to be, or the choices going to be? Because this one will allow multiple choices because we could have multiple prerequisites. Evaluate and staging, full backup, archive site, notify users, no prerequisites. And we're going to select checkboxes, allow multiple. Allow fill-in choices, yes, because there might be a prerequisite that's not on this list. And the default value is going to be blank. Click OK. The next column is going to be post actions. It will be choice also. The description is what must be done after the change. Require it contain information? No. The options are going to be reboot, restart SQL, IIS reset, verify change. This will also be checkboxes with multiple selections, and the default value will be blank. Okay, now that we've entered in the columns, let's go take a peek at our list. If we click on the breadcrumb at the top of the screen, you'll see changelog. Click on the link, and you can see we've got the information here. Type, change, assigned to, status, priority, and so on. We want to change the order. And to do that, we're going to click on our tab at the top. We want to see the ribbon bar again. And under List, you're going to see Create View, Modify View, Create Column. We want to choose Modify View. And that's going to modify the view that we're currently looking at. So we're going to remove attachments. We don't really need to see that. And if we scroll down, looking for description, we're going to select description. Notice that it wasn't selected prior. We want to keep assigned to, status, priority, due date, % complete, predecessors, approved by, all of that is fine, but we want to move description up to the third spot. So go ahead and click the down arrow to the right of description and choose the number 3. And that's going to put it right underneath change. So it'll be change, description, assigned to. Go ahead and click OK. And now you'll see description, change, assigned to. And you can reorder this however you prefer. Let's go ahead and add a new item. The change is going to be to remove SharePoint rollout site. There are no predecessors. The description is this project is complete. OK to archive and delete. The start date, you would put the appropriate start date. We'll put it for tomorrow. And the due date would also be tomorrow. And you can remove any of the columns that you don't want in here. Requested by, you would put whoever it is that made the request. And what it affects. This is going to affect the site because it's archiving one particular site. And the prerequisite is going to be archive. And notice we do get the option to specify our own value. And then to verify the change once it's done. And then click Save. And we have our first item in our change log. Now that we have a request to back up and restore a site, we're going to walk through the process of the available options for backing up and restoring in SharePoint. Versioning. Restores earlier versions of files or list items within a list or a library so that you can take it back to a previous version. And this applies if the document has changed, not been deleted, but has been changed and you need to get it back to where it previously was. The recycle bin restores items that were deleted from a list or library. Any item that gets deleted in SharePoint, whether it be a document or a list item, will automatically go to the recycle bin. There are two levels of recycle bin, and we'll go into that shortly. Site archives makes copies of a site or site collection before removing them from SharePoint. Scheduled backups recover after catastrophic failure. You want to make sure that you have these scheduled regularly according to your service level agreement. Versioning. Versioning is not enabled by default. However, it can be turned on in any list or library. Major versions are visible to all. Minor versions are hidden to a select group, depending on what your permissions are within that site. Be very, very careful with versioning because it can get out of hand very quickly. I've seen situations where they've had one item can have 100 versions at 4 meg each. So that makes that library very large. The recycle bin is one of the most valuable components for restoring items within a site or a site collection. Users and site collection owners can restore deleted items. Any items that get deleted from a site, whether it be a document or a list item, will go to the recycle bin. There are two stages to the recycle bin. The first stage is the end user recycle bin. If I delete something out of my site as an end user, I can go in and restore it as long as it hasn't been over 30 days since it's been deleted. After 30 days, it goes to the second stage of the recycle bin, which is referred to as the site collection recycle bin. It will sit there until 50% of the quota is met for that site collection. Once 50% of the quota is met, it'll start cycling out data from that bin. A couple of things that are not sent to the recycle bin. Deleted sites do not go to the recycle bin. If a user deletes a site, it's gone. It's not something you can just go back. You have to go restore it from alternative resources. And another item is going to be columns. If I delete a column from a list, that does not go to the recycle bin. That column is gone, and all the data contained within it is also gone. So that would also have to be restored with alternative methods. Archiving. Project sites accumulate over time. If you leave them on the server long after the project is complete, they just take up space and make navigation more difficult. To solve that problem, archive sites that are no longer in use and delete them from the server. There are two reasons to archive sites rather than just rely on backups. You can restore individual sites from archives. You want to have some policies and governance in place as to what sites meet the criteria to be archived. You may not want to archive everything. That can be rather intensive. It can be restored to any location within the farm that it was archived from. Keep in mind the farm will need to be at the same version if you're taking it to an external farm. If it gets to a point where sites are being deleted by accident over and over again, you might want to establish a policy that only IT members can delete sites. And that's where you would go in and modify the permission level. Archiving is a manual process. SharePoint Backups. SharePoint Backup features are intended for recovery after catastrophic failures. If you're doing a full backup, you can't recover a selective site without doing the full backup. You can't just go in and pull out what you want. You would have to do a complete backup and then pull it from there at another location. One of the options that you can use to backup is STS-admin, or you can use PowerShell commands. You can do a database backup. I recommend doing both. I do a farm level and a database backup. And central administration, you can do it via the GUI interface, but you cannot schedule it. You can only do the backups, and you can pull restores, but you can't schedule the backup to run every evening at a certain time via central administration. SharePoint does not provide a built-in way to schedule the backup process using the timer job. So to create a backup process that runs automatically, you must create a command script and schedule the script to run nightly using Windows scheduled tasks. Or you can purchase an add-on backup tool, or you might find that your organization has the capability or tools in place to do that. Disaster recovery. Usually this is associated with a catastrophic event. If you are restoring after a catastrophic event, you'll need to perform some tasks before restoring. You need to have the configuration database pulled from SQL and restored. Reinstall any solutions that were added to the farm. Rebuild alternate access mappings if you utilize that. That is not part of the backup process. And recreate your IIS metabase. Make sure that you do backup IIS. It is rare to have to restore a farm from such a situation. You are basically rebuilding the server from scratch. In any case, it is important to track the custom solutions that you installed and store the installation files and instructions in a separate location not on the farm so you have access to them in case of failure. You should also do periodic exports of your IIS settings so that you can restore them also. One of the great features of SharePoint is versioning. Versioning can be enabled on any list or library. So if a change is made and you don't like that change, you can always revert back to a previous version. Let's go ahead and take a peek and get started. Let's go to Shared Documents. And up at the top, you're going to see Documents tab and Library. Click on the library, and over on the right-hand side, you will see Library Settings. These are all the settings that you can modify within SharePoint, or within the document library or list. Click on Versioning Settings under General Settings. You can require content approval for submitted items, so that way it gets approved before it's put out for the masses to view. And you'll notice that by default in the document version history, no versioning is selected. We're going to select Major Versions. And you have an option between major versions and minor versions. Minor versions are considered drafts. So you could have example 1.0 is a major version. 1.1, 1.2, those are going to be minor versions. Be very careful with this, because this can make a document library that has 100 documents massive if those documents are fairly large and you have versioning turned on. If you do turn it on, I cannot emphasize enough, make sure that you limit the number of major and minor versions. If I click here and I say, I want 8 major versions. Let me change this. We're going to do major and minor. Create major and minor versions. If I say 8 major versions, and then I click for minor versions 8, When you initially look at that, you think you're going to get, okay, I'm going to get 16 versions. That's not the case. I'm going to get 8 versions for every major version. So I would wind up with a total of 64 versions based on this selection. So do be very careful with what you set, and you will want to have some governance and policies set up for your users and recommendations on how to use this. Drafts are minor versions or items which have not been approved. Who do you want to be able to see those draft items? Do you want any user to be able to read them? Only users that can edit the items and so on. And do you want to require checkout before they can be edited? We're going to go with the default here and click OK. So now that we've turned on versioning, let's go back to our document library. So let's go ahead and upload a document that we can test versioning on. Click Add Document, Browse, and Welcome to Versioning. Just a simple text document that we can use. Click OK. Now if we look at the versioning settings by clicking the drop-down arrow, you'll notice that we do have a version history option available. Click on it, and you'll see we have one version. But notice that it is in draft format. It hasn't been saved as a published document yet. So close out the window and click on the drop-down again. Because it's a minor version, we want to publish it to be a major version. So we're going to click Publish Major Version. Put in a comment. It's always a good idea to put in a comment for your version history. That way when you revert back to a previous version, you know right away which one to choose from and what changes were applied. So now let's go look at our version history again. We now have a major version. We can choose to unpublish it, restore it, or to view it. Let's close it out. Okay, now that we've looked at versioning, let's go ahead and take a peek at the recycle bin. But we're going to need something in that recycle bin. We're going to click on the Welcome to Versioning drop-down and choose Delete. Tell it OK. Well, it's gone. You would think that it's gone, there's no way to get it back, but that's not the case. If you come to the left-hand side, this is the user recycle bin. Click on it in the Quick Launch. And notice that we have 2 items in here for it. It's showing both of the versions that were deleted and another document that was deleted in an earlier time. If we want to restore it, we would just click on it and choose Restore Selection. Remember, this is the first stage recycle bin that the user will see. Are you sure you want to restore Welcome to Versioning? Tell it OK. So let's go see if it's back in our library. Yes, it is. But if you look, you'll notice that it says Publish Major Version. So the one that we restored was actually the minor version. So let's go back to the recycle bin. And let's restore the major version. It's unfortunate that it doesn't give you that information. The top one, if there's a list of them, it'll be the one that's on the top of the list that's going to be the most current version. We're going to tell it Restore. OK. Now when this happens, it's telling you exactly what it is. A file with this name, Welcome to Versioning, already exists. To restore, rename the existing file and try again. So let's go ahead. We really didn't want the minor version, so let's go ahead and just delete that. And tell it OK. So you have to be very careful when you're restoring the previous versions to ensure that you get the right one. You would think that it would pull all of them back. You restore it and it pulls all the versions, but that's not the case. Okay. Let's delete Wombat logo. This is one that doesn't have any versions associated with it. Click Delete and then tell it OK. and go back to the recycle bin. Now we have 3 items in here. Let's say 30 days has gone by, and Wombat is no longer available on the user side. Instead of having to pull it from backup, if you look at the top, you have a link here for managing deleted items for the entire site collection. Go ahead and click on Site Collection Recycle Bin, and notice that it's not there. The reason that it's not there is because we manually deleted it, but that's not the case, you would think. When you first look at it, you say, where'd it go? It's very, very deceiving. Notice the link is no longer there. When you click the link, you assume that it's taking you to that second stage recycle bin, but it's not. If you look on the left-hand side, you're still in the end user recycle bin. Click directly below it, Deleted from End User Recycle Bin. And there we go. We have our Wombat logo. When I choose to restore this, it's not going to send it to the end user recycle bin. It's going to restore it back into the library. It doesn't matter which stage of the recycle bin I restore it from, it'll always take it back to where it originally came from, the library or the list. So we're going to select it and choose Restore Selection, and then tell it OK. And let's go verify that it did restore it. And you can see we have Wombat logo in our shared documents. That's very deceiving, and a lot of people don't realize when they go to the second stage recycle bin that you have to actually click the link on the left panel to see that recycle bin. Now, we've looked at versioning, we've looked at the recycle bin. Let's go into Central Administration and look at our backup options. If we click on Central Administration for the farm, on the left-hand side, you're going to see the link Backup and Restore. From here, you can do farm backup and restores, perform a backup of a farm, a web application, restore from backup, configure your backup settings, view backup history, and check the job status of a backup that's currently running. On the granular side, you can perform a site collection backup. And new to 2010, you can now export an individual site or list without having to do it from a PowerShell or command line script. You can also recover data from an unattached content databases. A lot of organizations choose to use database backups as their primary backup process. You can also recover data from unattached content databases. These are databases that have been backed up from SQL, and you can pull the data directly from an unattached database. It used to be you had to restore the entire database, attach it to the farm, or attach it to your SQL instance, and then attach it to a web application, pull the data out from there. That's no longer the case. And again, you have the check granular backup job status for any jobs that are currently running. You will need to set up a file share for the backup process using the GUI interface. And what I've gone ahead and done on the C drive, again, this is just for demo purposes. Don't ever set your backups to go to the C drive. And I've created a folder called Backup. And I shared it as a hidden share to the users and given the appropriate permissions for the backup. So let's go ahead and configure the backup settings. This is going to be our backup location. We want this to be the default. So we're going to click on the link and you're going to get a couple of options. The number of backup threads, possible 1 through 10, and the number of restore threads, possible values 1 through 10. This paragraph is rather important. Notice that it says specify the number of threads to use for backup and restore. More threads may lead to improved performance. However, information in the log files for backup and restore may become more difficult to read. And if you have any failures or any issues, errors when it comes to backing up or restoring, you will need to be able to read these log files. So I keep this at the default. Backup location, whatever your backup location is, go ahead and put it here. and tell it OK. And let's start small. Let's export a site or a list. It's going to tell you the readiness. If there's any exports running at this particular time, you will not be able to perform the backup. Let's choose the site collection. Notice we have two. We're going to select the root site collection. Make sure if it's not, always verify which web application that you're choosing to back up. The site. Let's back up something from our IT site. Tell it OK. We're going to back up the changelog. And we're going to select the list, and the only list available to backup is our change list. If we had more, they would be displayed here. We have our default ones, but we want to choose changelog. Now, on the specify the destination, backup folder location, notice we're going to put in here our backup, but we need to have a file, and that's going to be our changelog, and it gives you an example of the format that it should be in. If there's already one there, you may choose to override existing files. Export full security. This can get a little tricky. If you're exporting full security from one site to another to a completely different site collection, be very careful, because all the security associated with the site collection it's coming from, all those groups and users, will be moved over to the other site collection. So you could wind up having hundreds of users and groups moved over to the other site collection unnecessarily. I usually default to not export full security, as we have run into some issues with that if it's moving to a site external from where it came from. And versions. Do you want all versions? Last, current, major, and minor. We're going to say all versions and choose Start Export. It's going to bring us to the job status page. Notice the diamond with the exclamation point, and export is currently in progress. So we have to let it run and do its job. As we scroll down, it's going to give some additional information. Current job, operation is initializing, who requested the backup, the URL, and the site associated with it. And it moved a little that was too quick. We didn't have a whole lot of content in there. Notice now the readiness is good. We're all in green. And it's going to give you the status, succeeded, the duration, and completed. And it also gives you the command if you want to import the data using the import SP web command via PowerShell. Let's go back to backup and restore. Now we just exported a list. Let's perform a site collection backup. We want to do the site. We're going to choose our root site collection. We would choose this one, the sites test, but we locked that and it's not available. So we're going to choose the root. The file name is going to be SP 2010 SV srv.bak. Notice the difference. The other one was CMP for the backup file name. This one is BAK. Go ahead and choose Start Backup. And it's letting us know a site collection backup is currently in progress and some additional information regarding that. Okay, that was done. That was easy. I've seen some run hours, depending on the amount of content that's in the site collection. So we've done a site collection backup. We've done a list backup. Let's do a site backup. We'll do one of each level. Export a site or a list. We're going to clear the selection. And this time we're going to change the site. We're going to back up the HR site and tell it OK. Notice again the file name on this is CMP. We're not going to include full security, and we will choose all versions. Click Start Export. So at this point we have a list, a site, and a site collection. We don't have to worry about individual items in a list or a library because those will go to the recycle bin. Okay, our backup of the site has completed. So the last thing that we're going to back up is going to be the farm. Let's click on Backup and Restore. And under Farm Backup and Restore, let's click Perform a Backup. Notice we get many more options here as to what we can and cannot back up. Or really, just what we can back up. We can do our service applications, our registry service, global search settings, and they can be backed up individually. And notice some of them do have plus signs or minus or plus signs next to them, which means they can expand out further. And it gives you information about what it is that it's backing up. The farm, content, and configuration data for the entire server farm. You can choose to just do the SharePoint configuration, which is the farm settings, without everything else, which would not include all the site collections and the web apps associated with the farm. It would just be the configuration of the farm. And this is new for 2010. We're going to choose farm. We're going to back up everything. And I highly recommend that this is done on a regular scheduled basis. Tell it Next. You can choose to back up the following components or go back if you want to change it, and you have the option to do that. Backup type, full or differential. Full backs up the selected content with all history. Differential backs up all changes to the selected content since the last full backup. You would never really do this via central administration because it is in the GUI interface and you can't schedule it. Primarily, the backups you're going to run from here, if you run them from here, are going to be full backups. Backup only configuration settings. We don't want just the configuration settings, we want everything, content and configuration. Notice that it automatically put in my backup location. Start backup. Now, when we back up a site collection, it uses that extension BAK, but when you're doing a full farm backup, it's not going to like that. It's going to say that does not exist, or the SQL Server service account that administrator does not have permissions to read write to the backup folder. So let's go ahead and just take it back to that and see. There we go. You don't have to specify a file name for the backup process for the farm backup. Now with this one, it shows us our readiness, but it's not really giving us any additional information. Let's click View History. Notice there was one that had completed earlier, and now this one is running right now. A backup or restore is currently in progress. So let's go back to Backup and Restore and click the link Check Backup and Restore Job Status. And this is nice because it's going to go through and let you know where it's at in what process, and if there's any failures and what those failures are. It's doing a full backup, 3 threads, an item count, the start time. It's always a good idea to gauge the start time so then you know when to best schedule them. But all of these items, the crawler, the server state service, all of these are in process right now, backing up. And then you'll see it says preparing to back up. The search service, it hasn't gotten there. It's going to run these. When these are complete, then it'll start adding more. And by the time it's done, all of these items will be backed up. Okay, it looks like our backup process has completed. If you look down here, it's going to let you know what the backup file, it automatically creates this folder. and puts all the content in there. The backup method, the number of threads, any warnings or errors. If you see anything here, you'll want to open up the log that'll be in the same folder and determine what caused the failure and resolve it. And as you scroll down, you're going to see that the progress now says completed for all items. Let's go take a peek at that folder. Notice we have our change log. That was our list item. We have our backup for the change log, the CMP file, and the export log file associated with it. Each one of the backups has a log file that is associated with it. In the SPBR001, notice when we were in Central Administration Backup, there were two backups. Well, one was already completed and the one we just did. This is for one that was done prior to the one that we just did, and this is the one that was just completed. And notice it also has a backup text file, a log file associated. And if you open it up, it gives you information, and this is where you would identify any possible errors or warnings. So now that we've backed up the farm and our site collections, let's go look at our restore options. Let's go to Backup and Restore, Configure Backup Settings, View Backup and Restore History. If we click on that, we'll be able to go in and look at the different items that were backed up, and if you expand it, it'll give you a little bit more detail. Let's begin the restore process. We're going to select the backup and choose Begin Restore. And then we'll come in and pick and choose the items that we would want to restore. We're going to choose Global Search Settings and tell it Next. To restore to a farm with the same computer names, web application, database servers, select Same Configuration. If you're restoring it to a farm with different computer names, in other words, if you're restoring it to a different farm, you will want to choose New Configuration. We're going to choose Same Configuration because we're restoring it back to the same farm. And then choose Start Restore. And click View History. Actually, let's go to Backup and Restore. We're going to go to the job status. Click Check Backup and Restore Job Status, and it'll tell you a restore is currently in progress. Okay. It will periodically go out and refresh the page. The restore has completed. And if we scroll down, we can see the item that we restored, and it does state completed.